the parts that you have heard from Tom and Michael, Zahir, Herb, this isn't an abstract thing. We're all affected by violence, whether it's in our block or our neighborhood or our city. We don't escape from that. The question is how we respond to that, what actions we take. The chief legal officer in Cook County is Anita Alvarez. She was reelected to her position, which meant she knew what she was getting into. One of the distinctive parts, she leads an office of 800 attorneys. I don't think leading anything like 800 clerics, it just boggles my mind. We're very glad that she's here. The chief executive officer for the law in Cook County, State's Attorney Anita Alvarez.
Well, thank you and good morning. I know the topic is violence and the gun violence, and I will speak to that in just a second. But I thought that considering the group that I'm speaking to, I want to thank the council for inviting me. I thought I'd just take a few seconds to give you a brief little view of how I grew up and where I grew up and my faith. And I was born and raised here in the city of Chicago, grew up in the Pilsen community. I am the product of Catholic education, Catholic grammar school, Catholic high school, Loyola University. In fact, Rabbi, the first time I was in a non-Catholic institution is when I got to law school, and 80% of the student population was Jewish. So it was a little change for me at Chicago Kent, a wonderful school. But growing up Catholic here in Chicago, and from parents who neither one had an 8th grade education, and the money was tight. My dad came here from Mexico, worked as a waiter. My mom didn't work, and it was a struggle financially to send us to Catholic schools. But my mother felt so strongly in her faith and in the opportunity for us to go to a Catholic school and receive that education. And so grammar school for me at St. Paul Our Lady of Vilna, which is over on 22nd and Hoyne, if you know where that's at. That's where I went. But when I was in first grade, the dear sisters who taught at our school, I had two sets. I had Sisters of St. Casimir and Sisters of Notre Dame because it was a combined school. The Sisters of St. Casimir discovered that my mom, Mrs. Alvarez, could sew. And my mom was an awesome seamstress, awesome, and it's ironic I can't sew a button, but my mom could make everything. She made most of our clothes, and it was at the time, and now I'm going to age myself, when the nuns were changing from their old habits into modern dress. And so my mom was summoned to the convent and by the sisters and was asked to take the material from the old habits and to use that material to make modern dresses for the sisters who were at the time changing their habits. And I went with her as about first grade, so I was little, and I'm sitting at the convent, and I was a little nervous, I have to admit, a little nervous. And one of the sisters came and started to undress, and she took out, the first layer of the habit, and the next layer, and the next layer. There are a lot of layers in that old habit. And she got down to her slip, and I, of course, being 6, 7 years old, whatever I was, turned beet red, and immediately, in my mind, started saying rapid fire Hail Marys, because although I didn't know what sin this was, I just knew. I knew this had to be a sin. I was looking at a nun in her slip, dear God, and she looked at me, she put her hand on my shoulder, and she said, it's okay. And my mother, and I don't know how she did it, but she did, and my mother did sew for the nuns and create new dresses from all those habits, and there really was a lot of material in those old habits. And that's kind of how I got through grammar school, because it was more of the barter system. My mother would sew for the nuns, and then they'd knock off this month's tuition, or they'd say, it could be late, it's okay. And that's really how I got through grammar school. But I tell that story because it really does show the struggle for many families, at that time, sending their children to Catholic schools. But most importantly, I think the faith that the education that I received, I'm standing here today, I believe, because of my education, and just the morals and the values that were instilled in me, not just in my family home life, but also in my education. And I can't tell you how, each and every day was drilled into us as young students, how we are to accept everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what color they are, no matter what they look like, where they're from, that you accept everyone with open arms and respect everyone. Even if their religion is not Catholic and they're different than you respect them. And that was instilled in me from early on. And those sisters really knew how to run a school and really knew how to really make you accept your values. And so I think that's really important in what I've been hearing today from the other speakers. It's like we may have different faiths, but we're so connected and we have more in common, right, than we don't. We have more in common. And I think we all want the same thing, and we all are really affected by this violence. It is killing our children out on the streets, and it should not be killing our children out on the street. And what can we do as a community? What can you do as faith leaders to help us, those of us who are in law enforcement, to somehow combat this horrific crime? We know what's happening in other countries, and we know what's happening in the world, and horrific things. But it's happening right here, too, in our own neighborhoods, and neighborhoods not far from where we stand today. And, so we at the State's Attorney's Office, as the chief, as the prosecutor for all the crimes, all the violent crimes that come in through the city of Chicago and the surrounding suburbs. I mean, we serve close to, 6 million people is the county, the prosecutor for the entire county. We unfortunately have many, many cases that continue to come in, and they don't stop. What we have seen, though, in the shootings, and the increase in the shootings, and the fact that we see more and more young people who are out there with those guns and shooting, is what can we do on our end to somehow help this situation? Obviously, we have to be reactive because the case comes in, we handle it, we prosecute in case that's our job. However, what can we do to be a little more proactive, and what can we do to somehow curtail this? In recent weeks, I have met with the superintendent. We have regular meetings to discuss crime strategies and discuss what's working and what's not working. Last week, I just met with the mayor, who clearly wants to see what he can do to help this stop. And, I think everybody, particularly in law enforcement, is looking for a solution. And, some people are looking for that magic wand, right? And that's just we can wave it and everything will be, perfect. Well, we all know that doesn't exist, because I think everybody in this room would have waved it already and we'd be fine. But we know that doesn't exist. So what can we do when we look at the laws to strengthen the laws, to give us, more tools, and to be able to hold those people responsible who are responsible for those shootings and those killings? How do we hold those people responsible? There's several things that we've been working at our office in the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and we're going to be working down in Springfield to kind of pass new laws. But let me just talk quickly about lost and stolen. And you've probably heard this in the last couple of weeks. For the past, as Dr. Oak just said, I just started my second term. But for the past 4 years, since I've been state's attorney, I have tried to pass down in Springfield a law, which we just simply call lost or stolen. And actually, I think it's a common sense law. It's a law that just would require anyone who, a valid owner of a gun, if he discovers his gun lost or stolen, that he report that to authorities within 72 hours of him discovering that. I don't think that infringes on anybody's Second Amendment right. I don't think really that that's anything that's out of the ordinary. We report our bicycles stolen, our cars stolen, our houses burglarized. Why not report a weapon, which we all know a weapon destroys things? Why not report that lost or stolen? I've gone down to Springfield to testify on that, only to be beaten up, I must admit, by the NRA about trampling on people's Second Amendment right. I don't think it's trampling on anyone's right. I think it's common sense. And the thought process behind that law is that we get to those straw buyers, because there are many people out there that, yes, in fact, have a valid firearms owner identification card. They can legitimately buy a weapon. But there are people out there that are buying multiple weapons, and those weapons are ending up in the hands of the gang members, who are the ones creating the havoc out on the streets. So how do you hold those people responsible? How do you get to those people and try to stop that? I was unsuccessful in passing that. We're going to introduce it. We have introduced it again now in the new legislative session. But I'm very happy to say that despite the fact that Springfield hasn't listened, the city of Chicago and the county, the Mayor Emanuel passed an ordinance just several weeks ago in the city council, creating that ordinance for the city of Chicago. The county board just last week passed an ordinance for the county, which I wholeheartedly supported, because I think it's a good thing and it's a good start. But when you look at our gun laws here in the city of Chicago, I was successful in 2009 passing a new law, which is called the Valadez Law. The Valadez Law is when an offender, a known gang member, is found on the street with a loaded weapon, a known gang member, that he is now not eligible for probation. In the past, those cases were probationable. We passed the Valadez Law in 2009, and interestingly enough, we had put forth that piece of legislation in the beginning of the legislative session of that year, and it didn't pass. And then that June in 2009, Officer Valadez, a Chicago police officer on duty, was responding to calls of shots fired in the Englewood neighborhood, and when he responded, he and his partners, he in fact got killed. And after Officer Valadez was killed that June, I reintroduced this bill down in Springfield in the fall veto session, and we were able to pass it. And we have seen a great, what we feel a great number, so to speak, statistics, with the amount of people who, in fact, are charged under the Valadez Law and who plead guilty and get time. And I know there is room for nonviolent offenders to be given a second chance, and that's something we do as well. But there are those offenders that need to be held responsible. And there are those people who, really need to do their time, so we keep them off the streets so they're not continuously murdering and shooting, which, of course, we see these repeat offenders. So the Valadez Law is something that's in place, and it's going well. But then we started to look at our laws, comparing them to other states. And what can we do to strengthen those laws? And in particular, the superintendent is from New York, so he speaks a lot about New York. And he's right when he says that, Chicago, they confiscate more guns here in the city of Chicago than they do in New York. And New York is almost 3 times the size of us, and that's not good, and those aren't good stats. And so we looked at, and I called my counterparts in Brooklyn and Queens and all the boroughs in New York, and we looked at their laws to see, can we strengthen ours? And one of the things that we discovered is, for the charge here in Illinois, an aggravated UUW, just a straight aggravated UUW, no gang membership, that sort of thing. The minimum amount, it's a class 4 felony, which the minimum amount is 1 year, 1 to 3 years. Well, in New York, the bottom line for a charge like that is 3.5 years. The reality of 1 year here is not 1 year. If you get sentenced to 1 year, it's automatically half of that, okay, because you get good time. So 1 year means 6 months. But when you really look at the numbers, the average amount of time that one person has spent in jail for a UUW is 61 days. Compared to New York, where the average is close to 700 days. The prosecutors in New York expressed to me that they actually did not see an improvement in the gun cases until they changed their law to create the minimum of 3.5 years on those cases. So that's something, when you think about it, when people know how to game the system and they get caught and they serve 60 days and they're right back out. And they're right back out, and what are they doing? They're back to their old ways. So we're looking at that law. We have some ideas for new laws that we want to put forth this particular legislative session, and I think we need to look at that. We need to look at straightening those laws. And again, I never look at those laws as somehow infringing on anybody's Second Amendment right, because the law-abiding citizen is not out there shooting. Okay, that's not who's going to be affected by a law like this. If you're law-abiding, you have nothing to worry about. But people who are out there creating this violence are not law-abiding, and they're out there, shooting, obtaining gun after gun, using the gang gun, which we see all the time. The gangs have guns hidden, and it's kind of a community thing. They get it, they use it, they put it back for the next person to grab and put it back. So those are the types of laws right now that we are looking at in Springfield, and we intend to put forth in this legislative session. Again, I think they're common sense. I think that they are there for us to protect, protect our children. And I think you as faith leaders, have an ability certainly that I don't have, because sometimes when you talk about sending people to jail, people get upset. But I think you as faith leaders, can do much more, because in your congregations, you have the ability to reach these young kids. You do have the ability through your congregation, through their families, to somehow touch them, to make them realize, that there needs to be respect. I think both Rabbi and Father mentioned that, there has to be respect, and I think that's what's lacking with a lot of our kids today, is they don't have that respect for one another. They don't welcome everybody with open arms, and they don't even think twice about hitting someone, shooting someone, grabbing something from someone. And the values have to start there. They have to start at home, and they have to start with the family. And I think, that's where faith leaders can come in, to help strengthen that. Is it easy? No. And you guys know as well as me, it's not. It's not an easy thing. But I think, there are programs, and no one program is a cure-all. Absolutely not. But if you can reach several kids, through a program and keeping them, occupied after school, or, whatever, on Saturday and Sunday, whatever it might be, that is a help, and to be able to reach them and help them understand that they are our future. So, getting shot at or running from bullets is not the answer. So I would ask you as faith leaders to work through your respective congregations to somehow spread that message to our to the youth today, that this is not the way we want to be. This is not where we're going to be. I want to see those kids, in law school. I want to see those kids, in medical school. And they can do it, absolutely they can. But they need the faith and the help and the strength from their families as well as their churches to kind of get them over the hump. And I will do my best on my end with the laws to make sure that we have the right laws in place that will help every one of our communities. So I just want to thank you again for letting me say a few words. And, I feel like very fortunate in being in a room like this with all the religious. I think I got a direct line to God right now. So I feel like I can do anything, It feels really good. So I would ask one thing of you, and that is to keep me in your prayers, because every day I have to make decisions that, no matter what decision I make, someone's not going to be happy. So, but keep me in your prayers to make sure that I make the right decisions as I go along in this second term. So thank you.